What's the creepiest or most unexplainable thing you've ever seen that you haven't shared anywhere? Serious. I was 10 years old riding my bicycle at dusk along the road I lived on, which was parallel to a set of railroad tracks. I moved off the road as a car sped by and a beer bottle came sailing at me from the front passenger seat. I could see two young women turned around laughing at me through the back window. I flipped them off and kept riding. About 30 seconds later, I heard the train slam into them. There's an app that has a database of all recorded accidents at railroad crossings. You could look this up if you really want closure. There were two guys in the front of the car and two women in the back. All of them died. The driver's balk was above the limit. When I was about 11 or 12, I went with my friend and my younger brother to play football in a park that was in a pretty remote place, so there were never many people. Basically 3 or 4 people came dressed in like Victorian-style clothes, set up a box underneath a tree with big branches, tied a rope around it. One of them stood there with this noose around his neck, and then his friend kicked the box so he was hanging. They took turns doing this, and we left. Was super weird thinking back to it, and I have to check with my brother whenever I think about it to make sure it actually happened. This sounds like an edgy photo shoot to me. That's what I thought as well. Some photo shoot or video, movie someone was making. Either that or some elaborate X game. I got recalled into work and was driving at about 3 a.m. I was in a very rural area in western Washington. As I come around a curve, I see a woman in a nightgown on the side of the road looking up at a steep embankment, just standing there staring away from the road. There are no homes nearby, not 4 miles. I call 911 and pull over about a minute up the road, not knowing what to think. Deputy showed up, couldn't locate anyone, and was as dumbfounded as I was. What is it with ghosts wearing white, flowing nightgowns? Just once I want to hear about a girl ghost rocking SpongeBob pajama pants and fuzzy mismatched socks. Yet, it is always a soldier in uniform or a woman in a white dress. You never see someone rocking parachute pants or platform shoes. Typically ghosts linger because of unfinished business. You think someone with frosted tips and wearing Chinko jeans is going to die with any regrets? Yeah? So many parties I didn't get to. My friend and I were sleeping in my parents' room one night when she was over, and it was probably about 3 a.m. Suddenly we hear a sound like a fart from the corner of the room, and distinctly from this one corner. So I ask my friend if she farted, and of course she says no, as it clearly came from the corner. Thinking maybe it's my dogs, as they sometimes sleep in my parents' room. I go and check it out, but realize they're not in the room with us. Okay, so that's weird, I thought. And my friend also said she heard a distinct fart too, so we assumed that maybe we both misheard. Then all of a sudden an unknown caller starts ringing my phone, and I don't answer, because at this point I'm freaked the frick out. After I decline the call, I receive a message from an unknown caller with the same area code as the caller who had just called me. The text message is all in Spanish, and me and my friend decide to paste the text into Google Translate, where it proceeds to say, "Did you hear that fart?" Needless to say, we never slept in my parents' room again, and we're convinced that we have a Spanish farting ghost in our presence. More than any other story on this thread, I want an explanation for this. The Spanish farting ghost who can text. Someone with the fart machine and a phone trolling some people. In my mother's house, the basement light would turn on while we were away, and even if it was turned off before we left, it was somehow back on when we got back. Once I went downstairs and was like, "Hey Mr. Ghostman, this is not good for the bills, could you please chill it with the lights?" "Yes, I know it's dark down here, okay thanks." Light stayed off. He seems polite. What a considerate ghost. Either a ghost or a Korean man being fed by your housekeeper. He's flicking the lights on and off, because he's using Morse code to speak to you. Respect, Mr. Park. My father died when I was 15. In my freshman year of college, me and my roommate in the dorms were somewhat close, but really had only been known each other for a month when the creepy thing happened. I hadn't told her much about my childhood, but she knew that my father had passed. One day she woke me up and asked me, did your father used to call you insert silly childhood nickname here?" I hadn't heard that name since I was 6 or 7. I definitely never told her that he used to call me that, as it was a repressed memory that I hadn't thought about in a long time. Anyway, as it turned out, she had a dream that my father had come to her and asked her to take care of me, calling me by this silly childhood nickname. It was always difficult for me that my father never saw me graduate high school or start college, but I guess he did, from wherever he is now. Back in 2016, my mother was staying at my place, because my father was in the hospital at the time and my apartment was right next to the hospital. One night I had this dream that the landline rings and my mother answers the phone and hears the news that my dad has passed away. She hangs up the phone and tells me that my uncle, a doctor at the hospital my father was in, just gave her the news of my father's passing. I wake up startled. I have a drink of water, and just as I start feeling relieved that this was all just a bad dream, the phone rings and my mom picks it up. I was just watching her from a distance, noticing the expression on her face, noticing the tears that started dripping down her cheek, and she hangs up the phone and tells me that my uncle just told her that my father has passed away. This is the only unexplained thing that ever happened to me, and this is the first time I share this with anybody. As a kid I had weirdly specific dreams that became true as well, but it was only about how and what candy I get on the day. I am sorry for your loss. Me too. I had dreams that were weirdly vivid that were from my viewpoint that would happen later. I was convinced I could see the future, but my predictions were pretty useless, lol. I've since learned there's a form of deja vu that makes you feel like something you're doing you've dreamed of before. Deja rev. I experience it a lot. It always is so crazy when I'm experiencing the moment in real life, and I'm like, wow, I've been here before. Sometimes I purposely say a different thing or do a different action than how my dream went, and it feels like changing my destiny or something. Hurrah. When I was about 9, in the 1970s, I was playing football in the street. A bus came along, so I jumped up on the pavement. As it passed, I noticed my aunt and she smiled and waved to me. When the bus had gone, I carried on playing. I went home several hours later to find my aunt had died the previous evening. I once had a dream right around the time of day that my grandma passed. She was on a bus and happy as could be. It stopped near my grandfather and I, on the road next to theirs, and she wanted me to go along. My grandfather kept insisting that I can't go. The bus left and she was smiling and laughing as she was going to the big casino in the sky. She loved going to the casinos. I woke up shortly after from a phone call that she had died about 15 minutes ago. Interesting, these comments about buses. After my granddad died of Alzheimer's when I was a teenager, I was so upset and I cried myself to sleep for a long time. Then one night a few weeks later I dreamt we were sat on the bus together chatting away, which was lovely, because he hadn't been himself for a few years before he died. After a while he pressed the bell and said this was his stop and he was sorry he couldn't stay on longer with me. We hugged and said our goodbyes and he got off, smiled and waved and tipped his cap as the bus pulled away. It was a goodbye I never got to have, and I felt such a sense of relief and closure after the dream. It was almost 20 years ago and I remember it vividly. A very good friend of mine was battling lung cancer. He seemed to be responding very well to treatment and was looking pretty damn good for having finished chemo. He contracted pneumonia, but he was doing so well we thought he would be pulled through. Went to bed that night and shortly after 10 I get this very odd sensation of someone passing through my room. Like there was a presence in my room, but it felt light and very free. My immediate thought was both. There was friend, and checked the time, but I didn't. I ignored it and tried to go to sleep. Slept like it all night, because I knew something was wrong, but I was trying to rationalize it. Got to work the next morning and checked Facebook, absolutely knowing in my heart what I am going to see, but hoping I won't. Friend had passed shortly after 10 the night before. Around 10 days later I had a very vivid dream that I was sitting in a cafe outside in the sunshine with friend. He looked great, very healthy and well. He had a very distinctive laugh that everyone in my family mimics when we talk about him, and I remember him laughing in the dream. We had a long conversation I unfortunately don't remember the details of. After we were done talking he went inside to the restaurant and I followed. He sat down at this big table and all these people started coming in to sit with him. They were looking at me with mild curiosity, like who are you and why are you here, but not in a threatening way. I remember thinking in my dream, I don't belong here. I woke up, but felt relieved from the burden of grief I was carrying for friend. I know he's okay now. Rescued a blue tick coonhound that had bad anxiety when we left, so he had to be crated. Went to the grocery store with wife and 2 young kids and left the dog in the crate. When we got back, the dog was out of the crate, but the crate was completely closed and latched. There was no apparent way it could have happened. We problem solved it for the entire day and couldn't figure out how he did it. Called him Blue Denny after that. His unmatched escape skills continue though. He could open doors. No fence could hold him in. The dog simply climbed fences. We ended up rehoming him for his own safety. He actually wound up as a farm dog, which I'm sure was his best home. So, there was a video on Reddit circulating in the last year or so where the owner of a boxer, I think, had the same experience. Couldn't figure out how the dog kept getting out, so they set up a cam. The dog had figured out to pull up the bottom of the cage just enough to squeeze his full-size body out, leaving an empty and still locked kennel. I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it myself, but I hope this brings you some peace. Should have put one of those dog cams on it. If this was recent, about 10 years ago, they were still a little pricey. My sister's blue tick is an escape artist for sure. They live in rural Tennessee and he likes to get out and trot down the street and visit the neighbors' hounds. He's a very sweet boy. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please smash the like button and leave a comment which story you liked the most. Subscribe and hit the bell notification for updates on our latest videos. And don't forget to check the links in the description box for more awesome content.